yes, fast growth is exciting, but if you put in deep roots, that's kind of what keeps you grounded and in it for the long run.
Welcome back to 40-Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders, all in just 40 minutes. Today, we're joined by Tamara Lohan MBE, co-founder and CEO of boutique hotel travel specialists, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I'm convinced many of you will be aware of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and I'm sure, like me, are repeat customers. So I am super excited to have Tamara on the show. Tamara founded Mr. and Mrs. Smith together with her husband James in 2002, and since then, the pair have been on an incredible scaling journey, scaling the business to over 1.5 million members worldwide, growing their distributed team, being awarded with an MBE for their services to British travel, getting B Corp certified, and being acquired by Hyatt in 2023. What a journey. So throughout all of that, Tamara has held multiple roles, starting as CTO for 15 years before transitioning into a COO role and eventually becoming CEO in 2020. So there is tons for us to dive into and explore today. And I just wanted to start by welcoming you, Tamara, to 40-Minute Mentor. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very well.
Oh, good. Well, we are going to warm you up with some quick fire questions just to ease you in. And then can't wait to hear all about your career. So please finish the following sentences after me. The moment that defined my career was when?
We had to rush a reprint of our very first Mr. and Mrs. Smith guidebook, despite what our distributor had said, that we would only ever sell 5,000 copies. We sold 25,000 before that very first Christmas and had to reprint. And we knew we were onto something.
Oh, that must have been amazing. What validation for what you were building. Amazing. A different question. My biggest failure to date is?
I think this is potentially globalizing too soon. I think in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we were quite opportunistic, as entrepreneurs tend to be, and the chance to extend ourselves into Australia came about. It was a great opportunity. But with hindsight, I think we did that too soon. I think we would have been best served really focusing in on our core market here in the UK and spending a little bit more time on growing that first before we extended our time zones like that.
Yeah. And that's a very different time zone to be operating in. I'm sure that example resonates with a number of founders. It's not the first time I've heard that on the podcast. So thank you for being so honest. A skill I wish I had mastered earlier is?
Saying no. It's kind of the same thing, isn't it? The opportunistic side. I'm just a classic. I get excited about new stuff and new opportunities and really, have had to rein myself back in. And especially my husband, who is even worse. Things that sound impressive, but don't quite align with where we're going. I wish we'd said no to a few opportunities along the way.
It must be a James thing because I'm exactly the same. It's something that when you are just excited, it's that magpie thing. You see something shiny and exciting and you want to run at it. It's not always the best thing. Thank you. And a life lesson I keep coming back to is?
Well, I've recently joined the board of Fortnum & Mason, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about it, has not been a fast burn. But at Fortnum & Mason, that's an amazing brand, such a great heritage. And the decisions we're making there are not about kind of quick wins, although there's a little bit of that as well. But it's not about short turnaround. This is about building a brand and a presence in London that is going to be there for generations to come. And so I guess I keep coming back to yes, fast growth is exciting, but if you put in deep roots, that's kind of what keeps you grounded and in it for the long run. And there are very few companies that actually are overnight successes. Most of them, if you really dig deeper, companies that have been running for a very long time, and that kind of resilience over time and that long-term vision is what keeps things going and generates success in the long run.
Absolutely. And you have completely created a really iconic brand, a category defining company over the long run. So it's I really admire that, and I think it's a really nice story. I'm really excited to dig into that story because it is different to say some of the other guests that may have come on the podcast that are in the early stages of scaling a rapidly growing AI VC backed company that's raised hundreds of millions of dollars. They are different propositions, and I really like the fact that you're building something really for the long run. But before we come on to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we'd love to start with your upbringing. I've heard that you grew up in Ibiza, so we'd love to know what that was like and what your early career aspirations were.
Yes, my parents moved to Ibiza, I think, escaping the UK in the late 60s, early 70s. And it was not the Ibiza that we know and love now, but it was a very free childhood. I can't really remember wearing shoes as a child. Like, I know I must have done to school, but my overriding sense was that kind of beach, that freedom, and very calm. It was a very calm childhood. And I think that's what's enabled me actually to be calm in crises later on in life as well. I think I have that from childhood. My father moved to the UK when my parents got divorced. And so as a child, my sister and I both came back and forth to and from the UK to see him. And that's what introduced me to travel. I couldn't quite believe that you got on a plane and a couple of hours later you were in somewhere completely different. Not only was it freezing here in the UK, which I just wasn't used to, but the people were so different and, the life was so different here. But the thing that really struck with me was cabin crew. And so my aspirations as a child was to be cabin crew. And I thought it was the most glamorous job in the world.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess the cold and the everything, I'd imagine shoes as well. You had to come back and wear shoes in London. So
Yes,
it'd
yes, shoes.
been a change. Interesting. Wow. Clearly that travel thread was seeded very early on in life and has continued all the way through. How interesting. I've heard that your parents were very entrepreneurial. So do you think that also had a big influence on the sort of career path you've ended up taking?
Yes, we returned to the UK when I was a teenager, and I saw firsthand my mother start a business from scratch and just how hard that was as well for her. Very late nights, lots of problem solving, no fallback, no corporate fallback and or protection, being your own boss. Her being able to come and pick me up at school every day. So, and then I went to boarding school a bit later, but it was very much, she was in control, but it was hard work. And I saw that hard work. And so that mindset has kind of definitely shaped the way that I approach things.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely. You already alluded to the upbringing and how the calm nature of your upbringing, the quality that comes from that as an entrepreneur, being able to handle the storms and stay very level. And then that entrepreneurial spirit that came from your family is clearly built nicely to create what you've ended up creating. But yeah, we probably should come on to Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Take us back, if you don't mind, to the very beginning. Where did the idea come from? How did the business get off the ground?
So I went on holiday, fell in love, had a holiday romance, and James and I started dating. But the passion we shared was for going away to nice hotels. So this is pre-kids when we had a bit more spare cash. And we could, at the weekend, we could just take off anywhere we wanted to. And in those days, you would kind of scrape the magazines and newspapers for new openings, get very excited about something in the countryside. You'd ring the hotel, ask for a brochure. The brochure would arrive at your house, and then you'd ring the hotel and book. So we used to collect brochures. We had boxes of those in our living room and used to go through and write, where are we going to go this weekend? The problem was that we were going through a bit of a design revolution in our homes at the time. So this was the era of Conrad, Heels, Habitat, IKEA. I remember those adverts. It was urging the housewives to chuck out their chintz. But the hotels in the British countryside just weren't keeping up appearances. So there were a lot of fusty old country house hotels where you'd walk down the corridor and smell that catering smell. And the decor was just old and very beige, lots of swirly patterns. And so we ended up at quite a few of these, very disappointed. But there was one particular weekend where we'd booked something specifically because we'd been working really hard. We thought, right, we need a bit of pampering. So we'd picked this brochure that had a picture of somebody being massaged. There was a picture of a kind of salad thing. So I thought, right, they care about their food. And it was a beautiful old manor house up in the Lake District. So off we went. And as we arrived, there was this beautiful tree-lined driveway, stunning property. And I thought, right, we've hit the nail on the head. This is going to be a perfect romantic weekend away. And I want you to remember, okay, James and I are dating. So we come into the hotel and go up to the receptionist, and the receptionist proceeds to take us to one side and weigh us and tell us our own weights. And that's not a good start to a romantic weekend away. So we're kind of really embarrassed. Going, okay, we'll go and see the room now. So she takes us up to the room, and it's everything that I've just said, this kind of fusty, old style, just hasn't been renovated in a while. They don't understand what it means to create kind of a vibe and experience and atmosphere through lighting and candles and scents, and the room is disappointing, and the Corby trouser press is in front of center, the most pride of place. And we look at each other and we just go, oh my God, we've done it again. So James tries to kind of make the whole thing better and says, let's go down and eat at the restaurant because that looked great. And we will buy the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu to make up for it. So I said, you're on. So I get my dress on, I get dolled up, it's date night, right? And down we go to the restaurant, which is stunning. But as I look around, everybody around me is in their dressing gowns, their bathrobes. And when we look at the menu, it's a calorie controlled diet and no alcohol. And so we've ended up in this kind of hotel that is trying to be luxury, boutique, pampering, but also trying to insert like the health thing that was kind of, becoming a trend, and just getting it all wrong on all levels. Like they hadn't read like what we were there for. And so James and I, we snuck out that night and we went to the pub, and over a pie and a pint, we started what became Mr. and Mrs. Smith. We wrote down all the things that we wanted to know. And we'd kind of been collecting this little black book of places in the UK that did understand how to create a great experience. And so we decided, okay, how hard can it be to write a book about the best places for a young couple in the UK to go away? And that's how it started.
Wow, what a great story. I love that. And we'll come on to talk about the evolution of the business. But when you think back to those early days back in 2002, starting a business with your partner, that in itself is a big risk. So did you really think about that, or did you just throw yourself in? And how did you find balancing business and a relationship, especially if it was relatively early days?
Today, you'd called it a side hustle. We didn't know that that's what we were doing, but it was our side hustle. We had day jobs. James had 2 other companies he was running. He's a serial entrepreneur. And I was actually helping. I'd come out of the corporate world, which I'd been in for many years, and I was helping my mother with her business, which was a dating agency. And I was building a database for her. So it was a side hustle. It was our hobby. It was the thing that we did in the evenings. And we were just passionate about it. We didn't pay ourselves a salary. We got told we were crazy every step of the way. We remortgaged the house to get the first book off the ground, seized money all from friends and family, and just did it because we were passionate about it, because we believed in it. And the people who told us that we were crazy, that the world didn't need another guidebook, that no one would understand if we called it Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that it was about hotels. I mean, all the crazy things people tell you, they weren't our target audience. And we knew our target audience because they were all our friends. All our friends used to ring us for hotel recommendations.
I was going to say, you must have been the most popular in your friendship group. You had all the insights, all the scoop. But no, I mean, it seems so obvious now, but what a brilliant idea. But I would imagine it probably was still quite challenging, like all startups are. Clearly, a lot of risk was taken, a lot of sacrifices made. So do you mind talking us through some of the biggest challenges you faced, particularly in those early days, and had to overcome?
So, the overcoming what you're doing is crazy. And so we ended up doing it all ourselves. Like no one would print it for us. All the publishers turned us down. we couldn't find a distributor because a lot of the distributors were affiliated with the publishers. So we had to find an independent distributor. They said that they couldn't distribute us because we only had one book and they only do publishers with two books. So we had to beg for them to take us on. So it was just hard graft. And we had to learn along the way. Like, nobody taught us how to put a book together and what perfect binding means. And even our printer said, you're crazy, because we wanted this book to look and feel like the hotel. So we wanted to use lots of different colors. We were printing like pink text on blue backgrounds and blue text on green backgrounds. I mean, it was just, and it was tactile. Somebody said to us, you're a luxury product. You need to print on gloss paper because gloss equals luxury. And we were like, no, this lovely paper is so tactile. We love the feel of it. You know, this is new. So it was challenging because like people who we should have been listening to were saying no. But we just had this kind of instinct that we were doing something a little bit differently. And so we wanted to push forward. And the people, you know, were the people who mattered to us, you know, our friends and our peer were saying, God, you know, I really need to know, where are the hidden gem hotels? Because none of the guidebooks out there have them. And then there was a challenge of also, you know, getting the hotels on board, our first partnerships with those hotels as well. You're unproven. We didn't even have a book to show them. All we had was like a little pamphlet of what we were trying to do. So convincing them to come into the book as well was another challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's totally innovative at the time. So I'd imagine you were having to work really hard to get people to sign up and get involved. But clearly it worked. And I guess you were in the role of CTO for the first like number of years of the business. So do you mind taking our audience on a bit of the journey, the evolution into the sort of digital side of the business, and what your highlights were from your time as CTO of the business?
Yes. So when I was working with my mother, and before that, I was working for Wonderman, a below the line agency, part of the Young Rubicon Group. They were building like databases for very large organizations like Ford and Unilever. And so I understood the mechanics of kind of data and data gathering and what you could do with that. And so even from the very first days of the book, we put a membership card in the front of the book, and that it did absolutely nothing in those days. But people would take it into the hotel and say, I'm a Mr. and Mrs. Smith member. I get something special at the hotel. And there was a tiny sign up page, and people were signing up. At that time, almost 25% of people who bought the book actually signed up, because I could see that, like, if somebody sold our book through Waterstones, I would never know who that customer was. And if we wanted to print another book, we needed to be able to, you know, it's the basics of like understanding, knowing your customer, getting their data and being able to communicate with them. So that was the very start of it. In 2005, everything changed. The internet had suddenly become somewhere that people started researching their travel. And the other thing that changed that year is that people started trusting the internet with their credit card details. I mean, look how far we've gone full circle on that, right? But anyway, so that, you know, the larger brands were saying, you know, our credit card taking is safe and you can trust us. And so suddenly the internet became somewhere not only where you could research your travel, but you could actually pay for it. And I was like, this changes the business completely. And we pivoted. In 2005, we found, because I didn't know what I was doing in terms of booking technology, we found a third-party system that did the bookings. We plugged that into the back of the website, created the content for the website, and started doing bookings. And that transformed the business. And when I think about all the changes that we've gone through the years, somebody might say, oh, that you were just scaling the company. But I think at each pivotal moment, it has required different thinking, different strategies. So it's more than just scaling up, it's changing the direction of the business. But that was a big one. I spent 3 years being very frustrated with that third party technology and thinking we can just do better ourselves. So I teamed up with a developer, and he left the agency he was working for, and he from his bedroom in Chichester, and I was in the office, and together we built the bones of what was the booking platform that we still stand on today. So that was CTO, and then, you know, all the way through, the technology became my passion.
Yeah, amazing. And it's really interesting because we haven't actually had many CTO founders come on the podcast before, I guess. So I'm particularly interested in how you made that transition then into the COO role, because we do a lot of, it's probably what we're best known for is COO search. So I'm a sort of, and I know a lot of our audience will also probably, there'll be a number of COOs listening. So would love to know what type of COO you were in terms of the Mr. and Mrs. Smith setting, because they really do come in all shapes and sizes, and why that was the transition you made as opposed to directly into a CEO role.
Yeah, so there are several reasons for that move. The board had asked me to step into the CEO role, but I didn't feel ready. It was classic imposter syndrome. I still had, this voice in my head going, really, you? But at the same time, I'd built up the tech team and the technology, and I knew that by then the technology was over 10 years old and that it needed completely rebuilding because there were new ways of doing things that it wasn't my expertise, and I could probably learn it, but actually bringing someone in who had already done that kind of transformation work was going to get us there much faster. So I knew I needed to replace myself as CTO and bring someone in. And luckily, I found the perfect person to do that in Steve, but I wasn't ready to take on CEO. And then at the same time, we had just won a partnership, really big partnership with IHG to integrate into their loyalty program. Now, I'd done an integration several years before with British Airways and learned a lot about doing that technical integration. And I knew that this big partnership would take not just the tech team, but the whole business. And to do it better, if I could sit across tech, the business, customer service, partnerships, and bring it all together collaboratively, that would make that partnership go way, way better. And so actually I saw an opportunity to really drive cross-functional change, introduce agile across the business, and make sure that we delivered that partnership really, really well. So it wasn't about the hierarchy, it was the impact that I could have in that position. And then I finally kind of gave in to the board who asked me to do CEO role at the end of 2019, and we set the date. The date that I would become CEO would be not the first, but 2nd of April, let's call it 2020. So I kind of been working up to it, right? And in the kind of 6 months or 3 months leading up to the end of 2019, I had kind of given myself an MBA in how to become a good CEO. So I read 10 books on leadership and how to be a great CEO. I took 10 CEOs out to lunch that I admired and said, what are your tips? What do you do? I read Harvard Business Review. I watched TED Talks. So I'd given myself this program because I was determined to be the best CEO. And of course, as we went into 2020, COVID hit, and I was just sitting there going, oh my God.
What about some fire?
What's about to happen? And in March, as we were kind of leading up to it, and we all kind of went home to work and all that kind of stuff, and it really started to kick off, the outgoing CEO said to me, would you like, just because we hadn't told the team at the beginning of March, he said, are you sure you want to do this? I'll stay on for stability. Now, that same day, I have a WhatsApp group of women leaders in tech, and somebody posted, COVID-19 is a once in a lifetime leadership challenge. That quote. And so when he said to me, would you like me to stay, would you like to just stay as COO for this terrible time that is coming? I just went, no, I wanted the challenge. And so I stepped into CEO, but had to throw away all the books, everything that I had learned about becoming a CEO. And just my first job was to make half the business redundant. It was awful.
This episode is sponsored by Foundation Partners, part of the Amplified Group family. Foundation Partners is reinventing how ambitious early-stage companies access people and talent support. Typically, when it comes to people and talent, founders take one or two routes. They try to manage it all themselves, which comes with huge opportunity costs compared to focusing on product or go to market, or they hire a generalist, expected to cover everything from culture to recruitment to performance. Foundation Partners offers a more impactful alternative, a fully flexible, fractional people and talent team with specialist skill sets and hands on delivery that starts driving impact in just 2 weeks. So if you're building something ambitious and want the right people and talent support behind you, don't go it alone. As a 40-minute mentor listener, you can book a free 1-hour advisory call with a managing partner worth £500. Just head to www.foundationpartners.co.uk/contact and mention this podcast. Now, back to today's 40-minute mentor. If COVID hadn't have happened, I would have loved to have known, like, from the conversations that you had with CEOs you admire and all the books and stuff, what did you learn from that? I guess for what you feel a good CEO should be and what you're intending to bring into the role. And then what has been your reality in terms of the actual leader you have become through the experience you've had? Is there any, because there's going to be people listening to this that are probably first time CEOs, or you had the same imposter syndrome you did. So we'd love to give a real honest opinion on what it's like to take a role like that and the different ways to do it.
Yeah, so I think what I learned from them was communicate, communicate, communicate. Be that present and listen, and don't get out of touch, because it can get kind of lonely and you kind of step back because you're not in the weeds, you're not executing. And so never step back so much that you don't keep in touch with your customers. So all the way through, I have a pseudonym in our customer service desk so that I can actually sit in and do calls and actually make bookings for customers, but they won't know it's me. So, that kind of thing. So communicate and stay close to your customers, I think, is definitely where I had planned to kind of lean into. What COVID taught me was positivity goes a long way, although that's also can be a challenge in a way. We can talk about more about that, but transparency. And I have really lent into transparency because everybody was so worried about their jobs and what was going to happen. And so we started kind of these really transparent calls where people could bring their fears and air them. And we would show them, how much money we had in the banks, that kind of thing, so that we really lean into that transparency. So that's what I have practiced because of COVID. And perhaps I wouldn't have been so transparent had I not had that lesson.
I really appreciate your candor here. I think it really was hopefully a once in a lifetime experience, but it's amazing how many people I've spoken to who have learned so much from the difficult decisions they've had to make, the resilience, the depths of resilience they didn't even know they had. And the same for me, albeit on a much different scale. We furloughed basically all of JBM, and I really didn't know if we'd have a business at the other side of it. And thankfully the market rebounded, and all of a sudden it was actually probably one of the busiest times we've ever had. But it does test you. And this is the truth of entrepreneurship. And this is why we have always wanted to be so candid on this podcast about the actual real experience and the downsides as well as the growth positives. So I really appreciate you sharing that. You have built an iconic brand. I think everyone listening to this will be aware of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and you've ultimately taken it through an exit, which is, I guess, what most founders and entrepreneurs are aiming for eventually. So I know our audience would be annoyed with me if I didn't ask you about that experience. Would love to know how that all came about. Was that always the plan? And what does the business look today, sort of post that exit?
Yes. So as we came out of COVID, we were flying, much leaner team, revenge travel, but we were in a really good place. And so I felt like the time was right. And actually, we'd taken on investment. When you found a company, if you don't take on investment, then of course it can be a lifestyle business, and you never have to sell if you don't want to. You pass it down to your children. But once you take on investment, then you owe those investors a return on their money at a certain point. And so we'd done a crowdfunding round in 2018, and that had set the kind of timeline. Had COVID not happened, we would have been looking to exit around that time, because you have the 3 years for the EIS to kind of stick. And so we were looking at that kind of timescale anyway. And so coming out of COVID, I felt it was the right time. And so we started to look. We did a very quiet, because nobody was buying businesses at that time. So we did a very tentative reach out to a very small number of people just to see if they were acquisitive. And Hyatt was, one of the ones who were interested. We had 3 interested parties. And I have to say, it was amazing because they really wanted not just the business, but the brand. They really know what they're buying, not just the kind of technology, but really what makes Mr. and Mrs. Smith special. They really saw that. So they've allowed us to stay boutique, stay true to our curation standards, whilst giving us, this incredible support of a parent company and global reach. So the scale is extraordinary. But what's really surprised me, I guess, is the people. So the people at Hyatt, they are very values driven, very thoughtful. They have a purpose, which is we care for people so they can be their best. That's their company purpose. And they live that. And that really surprised me in the best possible way.
That's amazing to hear, because it's not always the case. And, it sounds like it's been a really positive experience. And you've obviously stayed on as CEO. So has your role changed dramatically since that experience?
Well, yes. I mean, for the first time in 20 odd years, I had a boss. But testament to him, Mark Vondrasik, he is brilliant because he's allowed me to breathe as an entrepreneur, but also guide me through what it means to have a parent company. And I'm in transition now. So last month, I handed over CEO to Natasha Shafi, who has been my MD for the last 5 years. And she started at the company 20 years ago as a receptionist. So an extraordinary career, and she is now CEO of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and she is amazing.
Now that's something to be celebrated. Yeah. Wow. You must be very proud of that. That's amazing.
Yeah, but also testament to Hyatt that they didn't ask us to put somebody from Hyatt in, but actually allowed us to recruit from within. And she's been with us for such a long time. She brings that kind of founder mentality. She really understands the business inside and out. I'm not sure there's many jobs in the company she hasn't done.
Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful, and actually is the perfect segue to my next question. Given what we do at JBM, I always love to talk about hiring and culture, and would love to hear about your experience, because clearly you have hired someone there that has grown with you through the business from like a receptionist all the way through to CEO. So that's like an incredible example of sort of retaining top talent and that kind of meritocratic culture you've built. Do you mind sharing some of your biggest lessons that you'll be happy to pass on to others around hiring and retaining talent? What have been the secrets to your success there?
Yes, and I have to caveat that with, we haven't always got it right. So
No one does. No one does.
no, it's impossible. And you learn along the way, right? That's part of the learning. So some people you bring in because you want and need change. And then when they implement that change, they change the culture with it. And that's not the right move. And so, I feel like hiring for cultural fit, but also diverse voices is really important. So getting the balance right is really important. I think being very, very thoughtful about who you hire, and not just hiring for skills, but for different thought leadership, enthusiasm. That I guess it's a spark. I want to see a spark in someone. So it's an art. So I really worry this kind of hiring, and interested to see from your business, hiring through AI. How does the AI really account for that human connection that you make? And you just see it in someone, that drive, that passion to do well, to work well within your business, the passion for your brand and for wanting to join you. I think it's very difficult to do that in a data only world.
Completely agree. I think there's no doubt a place for it. It can be a huge enabler, I think, in executive search and recruitment. And of course, for certain roles, it will automate a lot. I'm sure we're seeing already the AI agents interviewing multiple people and hundreds, thousands of people. And of course, that can be incredibly powerful. But for me, that you cannot beat being in front of someone, having an authentic conversation. And that's why I believe, particularly for leadership hires, you will always need to search firm to play that role and to build the connection. And I think most candidates also don't just want to speak to an AI agent and don't just want everything to be transactional. I think there's something really important about having a sparring partner, a consultative person to play that middle ground. But there's no doubt that the world is changing and we need to adapt with it. But I think there'll always be a need. There'll always be a need. You have a fully distributed team. So that's obviously something that now is much more normal, but historically wouldn't have been the case. So when did you become fully distributed? And how did you sort of go about building a strong culture in that setting? Because that's something I guess now people will be listening in, building remote businesses, and will no doubt want to learn from somebody that's been doing it for a while.
Yeah, so COVID was the catalyst to that. But we'd been building the systems because I realized pre-COVID that hiring tech talent in London was really hard. And a lot of my great developers were in Europe and wanted to go back to Europe. So we'd already built out the systems so that we could work remotely. And that was an advantage when COVID hit, we were pretty much ready. And then I listened in to a webinar, very smart woman talking about how through COVID, the companies who said, we're going to go back to the office at the end of this would not learn during this time how to be a fully remote business. But the problem is we would be in this for such a time period, we already were, that going back into the office would have to be another learning period. Whereas if as a company, you made the commitment to go remote, you would spend that time learning how to be a remote business. And then hybrid, well, nobody really was doing hybrid at that time. So that was a whole new learning curve that people would have to go through. And so I thought, well, if I want to optimize the time I have here, I will use this time to understand how to create culture, how to maintain culture, connect human connection in a fully remote world. And then we won't ever have to need offices. And to be honest with you, as a travel company, we're not in hospitality, as in we're not in the hotels. Most of our office were traveling all the time anyway. So we just had to learn how to be a fully remote business and keep the human connection. So we get lots of meetups. We do all company get-togethers. We have team meetings. There's a culture online of connection. And I really believe in it because it gives the ultimate flexibility. And it's all about autonomy, being able to have that autonomous work ethic. But also on the side of the company, we have to trust in our employees are doing the work, and it's about outputs and outcomes, not input. I don't care if someone is working at 3 a.m. or 5 p.m., is taking the kids to school. We actually have a on the school run icon in our Slack, so people know when the mums are on the school run. So they know, like, you could probably have a snatched conversation on the mobile, but they're not going to be at their computer. A lot of us have dogs, so we have like dog walk and talk whilst we're on dog walks.
That's just really considered and thoughtful.
Yeah, so I think that's how you have to do it.
Yeah, totally. No, I mean, that really great to hear. And I'm sure that's going to be incredibly useful for anyone that may be struggling a bit with this to kind of do it in the right way. So thank you for sharing. Before we get to our wrap up questions tomorrow, I have to ask you about the wider travel industry, because you are a real expert. And obviously the industry's been through so much in terms of change and turbulence with the pandemic. So what are the biggest changes that you've seen throughout the years with the industry sort of as at large, and how have you navigated those changing tides?
Yes, so travel is an incredibly resilient business. And luckily, COVID aside, people don't give up their holidays. When times are tough, people travel smarter. They'll, combine trips or trade down or not go by plane, or they'll travel smarter, but they won't give up their holidays. So fundamentally very resilient. There are good and bad trends in the travel industry. So one of the most worrying trends is technology getting in the way of human connection. So technology really is only progress if it strengthens that magic that humans give to humans. Because when you're in a hotel, when you walk up to reception and the receptionist is looking down at a screen and doesn't look up, technology just getting in the way. And people talk about the ability of AI to allow us to surprise and delight, but not if we are putting the iPad in between. And so I worry about this technology becoming the play rather than the human connection. And the human connection is the most important part. But on the plus side, there's so much good happening as well. And I see this in amazing hotels like OSC in Italy, Clavedal Farmhouse in Portugal, Ushuaia Casa in Brazil. These are hotels where they're fundamentally becoming part of the community and putting good back into the community, because the press that you see in places like the Canary Islands, Mallorca, where the people who rely on tourism are saying, we can't stand this anymore, right? There's something fundamentally wrong there, where the industry that supports them and provides their livelihoods is damaging the community. And so it's these incredible hotels that are actually a really important part of the fabric, of the local fabric. That's the kind of future I want to see more of, because hotels shouldn't just fit into their surroundings. They should give something back.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess to that point, what can hotels and travel businesses do to work closer with communities? It seems like there's clearly some examples of this happening, but for those that have work to be done, how can they do that?
I think they just need to think like a good neighbor, right? So they look at the community around them and say, well, how can I help? And it's the hotels that either create opportunities for local communities, and that's in kind of training. Schools, Clavedal have a school for people with serious learning difficulties. OSC has Dynamo Camp, where they bring in children who can be children again. They're children with very serious illnesses or severe disabilities. They've got this climbing wall, incredible climbing wall. I mean, I would be scared to go up. And no matter how disabled you are, they will get you to the top of that wall. I mean, it's extraordinary. And the whole hotel, the hospitality side feeds that side of the local community as well. But for anybody looking to get into this industry, I would say it's a huge fragmented industry. So there's huge amounts of opportunity. The margins can be a bit tricky, but it is one of the most rewarding, welcoming, diverse sectors to be in, and one where curiosity pays. So it's hard to get cut through, but if you have a product or something that sets you apart and you really understand the value you bring, then you can make a difference.
It's great advice, Tamara. Thank you. We're sadly at an end. We've got two final questions. This is 40-minute mentor. So I have to ask, if you could be mentored by anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
So I thought long and hard about this. Actually, towards the end of last year, I had the privilege of interviewing Linda Fain Leveson. She is an incredible business leader. She was celebrated as the first woman partner at McKinsey, and since then has gone on to do like incredible influential roles in global corporate boardrooms, VC, great innovative companies. And she champions diversity and purpose-driven leadership. And the interview with her was extraordinary. It was just so fascinating to hear her wisdom around leadership and how, staying the course. It really stuck with me. And I wish that I had had her as a mentor when I was growing up in my career.
That's a great answer. And finally, what's one piece of advice, career or life advice, you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
I guess it's, don't try and have all the answers. Just get started and be curious and bring that inner courage to just start and figure stuff out as you go. That's what we did.
Very well said. Tamara, it's been an absolute joy, a real privilege. Your story is an incredible one, I think really inspiring for our listeners and for myself. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Cheers, Tamara. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. If we have left any questions unanswered, or if you have any feedback or guest recommendations for future series, then please make sure you get in touch on info@jbmc.co.uk. I often get asked by listeners how you can help us spread the word about 40 Minute Mentor. There are two simple ways you can help. Firstly, share this episode on your preferred social media platform, and LinkedIn is probably where I'm most likely to see it. And you can also leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every share on social media and review left on the podcast platforms really helps us to get 40 Minute Mentor in front of new audiences and share the power of mentorship even further. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship.